Well, Labor Senator Kristina Keneally spoke out on immigration over the weekend, writing an opinion piece for The Age and Sydney Morning Herald, linking our rising unemployment numbers and weak wage growth to the shape and size of our migrant intake. What she failed to note were the government figures released last week, showing Australia can expect an 85% drop in migration in 2020-21, the financial year. The government were quick to respond to Keneally's comments, acting Immigration Minister Alan Tudge noting this. Labor cannot stick to one position on migration from one day to the next. He joins me now from Canberra. Alan Tudge, I know you're a minister for many other things. Let's start, though. You're the acting Minister for Migration. You've been in this job for about 6 months, I reckon. So over the weekend, Kristina Keneally pushed into a smaller intake push, I suppose. Not all of her colleagues seemed to come with her. Some did. Last year, though, your government has already reduced the permanent intake from 190,000 to 160,000. So I take it you'd be supportive of her contribution?
Peter, I'm not quite sure what the Labor position is on migration, because she said one thing, but half the shadow cabinet are saying a different thing. She didn't get support from key people like Brendan O'Connor. Albo didn't back her in. Ali is out there today criticising her, as is Kim Carr. So it's not clear what their position is. Furthermore, it's not clear what her position is on temporary migration, because on the one hand, she's been criticising us for not providing temporary migrants with the job keeper and job seeker payment in order, in her mind, to keep people here longer. And on the other hand, she's saying, no, we don't want temporary migrants. So which is it? She's completely inconsistent from one day to the next. She's not across the detail, and certainly has got a very divided party on this issue.
You and I had conversations, though, going into last year's election. You were doing work on a population strategy. There was poll after poll showing Australians wanted a fair income debate in this country, an open, transparent, not politically correct debate. This was Labor voters, this was Liberal voters, and importantly, it was also Green voters, about how much population Australia should have, what our long-term trajectories are, whether we needed to come down from the record high of the Rudd years in terms of net overseas migration. And this is for the benefit of people at home, I know you know, but this is the permanent and the temporary visa holders at any given time in the country. The fact that Labor, or at least Kristina Keneally, has given you a little bit of an opening on the weekend, doesn't this now enable us to have a conversation that everybody says they want? Maybe not the politicians, but certainly the voters.
Well, at the moment, Peter, our migration is zero because the borders are closed. And our expectation for next financial year will be that migration will be 85% down on those otherwise forecast figures of about 240,000. So the whole world has changed in relation to migration, and it'll be some time yet before we get back to, if we do it all, back to where we were previously. And it's just too early to say what the world is going to look like in 6 or 12 months' time in relation to migration. Of course, the migration settings will change and adapt as a result of the coronavirus and how we transform afterwards. But right now, as I said, we're not letting anyone in the country. So this conversation which Kristina Keneally is having is a bit left field, because at the moment, literally, it's zero.
Yeah, but that's not by any policy design. It's not that you've gone out there and said that's a good thing or a bad thing, that we reduce our immigration to least significant levels. The borders are shut because we have a health emergency here. That's the reason why we're having this conversation. Isn't this then the ideal time to reset? Because if you look at per capita growth in Australia, over the last 25 years, we've actually had 3 recessions per person, if you look at it in those terms, if not, in grossed up GDP terms. So clearly, individual net wealth for Australians has gone backwards on 3 occasions. Australians don't feel, particularly because their wages haven't gone up, and it's going to be tougher even now, that they are getting ahead. Now, she's come around it the wrong way, and you're right, most of her cabinet may not be with her. Isn't this the time, now that we have shut the borders for a health reason to have a proper reset for a sound policy reason?
Pete, we will have to think very carefully about how we do reopen our borders and what priorities we put on which particular visa classes when we do reopen the borders at some stage in the future. I will point out, though, that overall migration has been very good for the country. It's been good economically and obviously it's been good socially. The nation is built on migration. And it's even according to
I agree with you there. I want to jump in there. But I agree with you there, Minister.
But it has been, I'll just make this point, it has assisted us not only on GDP growth, but on GDP per capita growth as well. And about 20%
but Alan Tudge,
of the per capita wealth increase has been due to immigration.
You can read a balance sheet as well as I can. It's lazy. You know that it's lazy, and you know that in those ERC meetings, they ratchet up the numbers. They ratchet up the immigration numbers because they need to turn the dial on growth. You know that, and I know that.
I'm not going to agree with you on this, Peter, because as you also know, a big part of the net overseas migration figure is actually demand driven. And what I mean by that is last year, for example, tourists was the second biggest category of the net overseas migration figure. Now, we want more tourists. They come over here and they spend more money. The largest single category of the net overseas migration figure last year, Peter, was international students. And again, they've been a boon for Australia and support about 230,000 jobs. So that's now in the future, of course, those two categories alone are probably going to be diminished. Certainly tourism will be.
What about the comments from the Productivity
exactly
Commission?
What international education is going to say.
What about the comments from the Productivity Commission yesterday that the 85% weighting of the significant investor visa class is Chinese weighted, 85% Chinese weighted, and they say the scheme should be scrapped?
We're taking a look at that scheme, and I actually put out a discussion paper late last year in relation to it. That scheme, for those who don't know, is when a person has to invest more than $5 million into the country and pass a number of other hurdles as well to get in. And you're right, most of the people who are applying are from China. There's some people who apply from elsewhere. But from memory, it's only been about 1,500 people per year that have been coming in under that scheme. So a relatively small proportion of the overall numbers that we're talking about here, Peter. So I want to put that into context. The bigger numbers which have been coming in, as I said, it's been international tourists, it's been the visitors, it's been the backpackers, it's been the Kiwis. Yes, it has been some of that skilled migration as well, but we've really pruned down on that skilled sponsored migration, as you know, with the scrapping of the 457 visa, the strengthening of the labour market testing so that Aussies do get that first chance of getting the jobs before an employer can sponsor somebody in. So having said all that, of course, we need to think very carefully about what the program looks like into the future when we do reopen the borders. But at the moment, our priority has been to close the borders because that's where most of the infections have come from in the past, and it's been a big part of our success today in keeping the lid on infections.
I've got to leave it there, but my message to the Prime Minister is you're only the acting immigration minister, but you're the biggest policy brains in the government. He should give you the job permanently while the borders are shut in particular and have a rethink of some of these settings. But yes, I don't know that he likes the free advice. Thanks very much for your time, Minister.
Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you.